College Football Playoff Selection Committee made its latest rankings known on Tuesday night. Oklahoma State at 7, Oklahoma at 10. I believe both teams moved up 3 spots.
Yeah.
Regardless, they sit at 7 and 10 now. So there's a thought by me that what should happen is that that Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, having gone through the Big 12 gauntlet and then winning a conference championship game, should be a playoff selection. I wonder how much the 7 ranking tells us versus the 10 ranking, and whether Oklahoma State truly has more of a inside shot at leapfrogging Cincinnati than even Oklahoma does.
That's very interesting. I think, well, if that happens, it'll be a very good debate, because I think for Oklahoma in the past, it was really kind of a no-brainer, right? In some of those situations that they would, because of the name and because of the history and because of the success that Oklahoma has had, they would pretty much not necessarily be a shoe-in, but I think that that has a lot more weight than a team like Oklahoma State or a team like Baylor. So I think both teams, particularly Oklahoma State, is in a good situation. I think you don't have to have a whole lot happen, other than, obviously, I think you need, both teams would really need Georgia, obviously, to continue to win and beat Alabama, just to eliminate 2 SEC teams from being in contention. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting whether it be Oklahoma or whether it be Oklahoma State, if either of those teams happen to win the next 2 games and Cincinnati wins out, what does that do perception wise versus an undefeated Cincinnati versus a 1-loss either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State in that debate. I think, to your point, I think Oklahoma State's resume is certainly stronger than Oklahoma's thus far this year. However, if you're Oklahoma and you beat Oklahoma State back-to-back weeks, what does that do to that national perception, which has been a team that has historically been really good this year? They've not been as impressive as most people would have thought.
Yeah, so I don't know how the committee or anybody else would factor in beating the same team 2 consecutive weeks versus beating 2 different opponents, although we're in a conference situation where everybody's played everyone anyway. So Oklahoma State's proven that it can beat Baylor. But they would, of course, play both of them here in the next 2 weeks if they win the game against Oklahoma versus Oklahoma defeating the same team twice. You can shake that out a number of different ways in regards to that. I don't know if the committee's sending any kind of message moving Cincinnati into the top 4. And of course, they've got to play a Houston team in the conference championship game that so difficult to rank and rate and evaluate. Group of 5 teams are a quality team, certainly. To what degree? I don't know. Houston lost to Texas Tech in week 1 pretty decidedly and blew a 3-score lead. And since then, they've beaten a lot of marginal teams. So that's what Cincinnati's riding on, and that's what the committee is valuing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Mark. I thought there was a chance we might see Michigan at 4 and Cincinnati at 5, but I think based on Cincinnati finally got that impressive win. I know it ended up being 48-14, but they dominated SMU throughout that game on Saturday. So they finally got that dominating win against a lesser opponent than that I think the committee and then internally Cincinnati was looking for. So don't really have a lot of blame, for that. I think they kind of needed to. I think just from where Cincinnati is from an undefeated perspective. But the one thing that I was really, really pleased with, and a little surprised, but I think really pleased with the fact that how well Ohio State played on Saturday, and Alabama didn't play horribly, but not extremely impressive against Arkansas, and so Ohio State moved up ahead of them, which I think that was obviously needed based on the performance on the field, and minus that slightly less than impressive performance against Nebraska, Ohio State has been really, really solid over the last 6-7 weeks. So yeah, I think that was interesting. One of the things that caught my eye from that perspective as well. And like I said, you've got, if you're, back to our previous conversation about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, you've got a few teams that are in the mix ahead of you. You've got Notre Dame, which is really, I guess there is a path, but with they'll need some chaos. I think either whoever the winner is of the Big 12 certainly jumps them, and you got to think if Alabama loses, they will jump them. So they're both of those teams are in decent shape, not not completely controlling their own destiny, but still at the same time they have there's a certain clear path, which for Oklahoma, I don't think we could have said that a couple of weeks ago. I think a lot of people, including us, thought if Oklahoma lost the game, then based on their track record this year, then they probably were out of the conversation. But may not necessarily be the case now. We'll see. I mean, to your point, it'll be interesting to see how the committee would value a back-to-back win situation versus a team that many people think is a consensus top 10 team in the country.
There is still the possibility that Alabama loses a close game against Georgia and retains a top 4 spot. There's much debate there in regards to evaluating the team versus evaluating and honoring the record, the championship, and honoring what the structure should be in terms of deserving. I can go both ways on that in regards to, at least I get the argument that Alabama is probably a top 4 team in the country. And even if they lose to Georgia, they are probably one of the 4 best teams in the country. But if that's rewarded, I really don't. I think that really tarnishes the process and really tarnishes the sport. Like, why are we playing in conferences? Why are we competing for conference championships? Why are we going through the process of playing these games? Because otherwise it just seems like the SEC is going to get its spots, and then some combination of Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma are going to get the other spots, and that's what the sport is.
Yeah, no, completely with you. I mean, I think the part that I would have a big problem with just nationally, if you put in a 2-loss Alabama over an undefeated Cincinnati team, I mean, that's a little problematic for me. Exactly to your point on do the games matter anymore on the field, or just do we just select the 4 teams that we think are the best? Now, the one thing that I would say with Alabama is if you have a team like Alabama and you think, I mean, I think most of us would agree that as of right now, they're probably one of the 4 best teams in the country. Having said that, they haven't necessarily played extremely well down the stretch. Beat Arkansas by 7. And then they've struggled in a few other games here. As well, and they haven't been as dominant. So if you had a team that's a 2-loss team that have been extremely dominant, I could see the scenario, but I would have a big problem with over Cincinnati. And then I don't know, to me, maybe I look at things differently. Conference championships matter to me. So finishing second and being rewarded to me is just a bad overall sign, I think, for and not just against Alabama, any teams that don't even make their conference championship or lose a conference championship game, to me, being rewarded for that is not great for the sport.
Yeah, this is not the NFL where everyone's playing a like schedule. So if a particular division is extremely strong, then reward the teams that finished with better records in that division with wild card status, and that's the way the process is set up in the NFL, and it makes total sense. In college football, we can speculate all we want, and we're probably correct much of the time in terms of who we think is the best, but there aren't the games on the field to substantiate it. There's not the competition on the field and the schedule to substantiate it. So if you're not representing the various conferences, then the sport is just loses credibility.
Yeah, without a doubt. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's why there's such a big proponent for this expansion of the college football playoff, whether it be 8 or 12. It looks like a lot of people are pretty solid on the 12, but and I think that's if this situation comes to a head this year, you have an undefeated Cincinnati versus a 2-loss Alabama versus maybe a 1-loss Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, in a battle for 2 spots with 3 teams that may very well be deserving. I think that will even further the conversation and the noise for an expanded playoffs, which we've talked about this a lot, Mark. We'll get. I mean, it just depends on, I think, when. I mean, I know that conference realignment might have slowed it down a little bit, but maybe there's some momentum that's picking up, over the last month or so. But yeah, I think it's something that we see every single year. I mean, heck, you look at college basketball. There's still teams with a 68 team tournament. There's still teams that validly sometimes get left out. So, and when you go from 68 to 4, I mean, it's certainly something that will be needed, and I think it'll be great for the sport just in general.